Good morning, gentlemen. We are back in the classroom here for another edition of Manhood 401 here at Manhood University. So let me ask you something, fellas. Have you ever known that you were right? I mean, just absolutely right from the start, and nobody could tell you otherwise. Okay, so check this out. Proverbs 16:2 says that all a person's ways seem pure to them, but their motives are weighed by the Lord. So I'd like to let you have that sit with you for just a second and be the lens you view this week's lesson through, okay? Now listen, when I was in marching band, freshman year, that's where we learned how to march for the first time. They would hand us these markers and maps to depict where we were going to be for each of the shapes that the band formed. And it took a while to get the hang of it, but once we did, it went relatively smoothly. In fact, one of the best feelings that we had was for the band director to say that we were hitting our markers better than the upperclassmen. And I really thought that would motivate them to do better, but they would just kind of snicker at us as we were trying really hard to impress the band director, show them that we could land on our markers every time. It didn't take long, though, for us to learn why the upperclassmen weren't really fazed by the criticism. And you see, while we were endeavoring to hit our marks, the formations never really seemed to take shape. The problem was that we made up about 25% of the band, but the upperclassmen, they learned something that we hadn't. So about 3 weeks into marching season, when the kid gloves came off, the band director finally connected those dots for us. He points out one of the freshmen who is standing exactly where he's supposed to be, according to the charts anyways, and he says, "What's the problem with this formation?" And that freshman, he doesn't know where this is going, but he looks around, he smirks, and he says, "Well, because they're not where they're supposed to be," pointing to the rest of the line. And patiently, the band director, he says, "Well, look around. What else do you see?" The freshman, well, he looked around again. He saw that the entire line was together, just in the wrong spot. So this time he was a little self-righteous with his reply and says, "Well, I'm right." And that's when I heard a phrase. Now, I thought the band director had coined it on the spot, but it's a phrase the upperclassmen were just waiting to hear. He says, "Son, you are right. You are dead right." The band director, he went on to say, "Look, your whole line's together. But you're so concerned with proving that you're in the right spot that from the view of the stands, you look wrong." And the upperclassmen, they've been vindicated. And of course, they used that phrase for the rest of the season. Anytime us freshmen got a little too full of ourselves and we forgot what the larger purpose was. So men, have you ever dug in your heels? Have you ever decided that being right was more important than the task at hand? Okay, that's not you? Come on. Man, our egos can't really be extracted from us. Sometimes we bite off more than we can chew. We get on our high horses. We condemn every choice that doesn't align with our personalized vision of right and wrong. We have a narrow point of view. And sometimes we take those principled stances without a firm foundation. In a lot of cases, we just run off at the mouth. And even after we're given a reality check, we're so afraid of what people will say that we stay the course after a bad decision. Look, in each of those cases, we plant our feet and then we end up taking a charge that we could have just avoided. So, hey, for those who have that self-serving view of righteousness, how about you consider the times that Jesus healed on the Sabbath? One of my favorite stories there we find in Luke chapter 13, starts in about verse 10, and we see him healing a woman. But instead of people recognizing that that's a miracle, the greater good, the Bible says the synagogue leader, he was indignant. And only when Jesus points out his hypocrisy was he ashamed. Does that remind you of anybody? Have you ever been that guy who criticizes first and has to be put in his place before he'll back down? Okay, that's not you? All right. Well, let's talk about that principled stance that's based on our own personal doctrine. So let's say here I am, minding my own business, waiting for my burger during a layover at the airport. And there's a news story that comes on about some crooked preacher who's going to jail. And there's this guy, let's just call him Jeff. Jeff decides to make me his new best friend and enlighten me. All preachers are crooks, he says. He's got that look in his eye, the one, that same look people get when they're about to tell you why their political party has all the answers, why their take on Wall Street is the only one you need. And this particular day, it was, of course, why he's got the inside scoop on all the crooked preachers. So look, not wanting to comment on the actual crook in the news story, Jeff decides to relay a short story of a ministry that he doesn't know that I'm acquainted with. And he tells me how all the money they take up just goes to keep that preacher rich. And I say it's a short story because it's really all he has to offer. And what's funny As I happen to know this pastor doesn't take a dime from the church because he's blessed enough to have his own streams of income. And I just couldn't resist. So I asked Jeff, how do you know? Oh, I know, he says. Everybody knows how dirty all these preachers are. Then I get this part. Hey, I've talked to people in his inner circle, and man, the stuff he gets away with. I'm like, okay, so you're from that city? And that's my next question. Well, no, but I know a guy who pretty much told me everything. Okay. And then he follows it. All those preachers are alike. Everybody knows it. I'm like, okay, Jeff, well, what if I told you that I know this man? I know how he makes his money, and he doesn't take a dime from his congregation. He doesn't need to. Okay, folks, let's pause for a minute because this is the moment where that lesson about accepting correction comes into play. Jeff could have said, well, I stand corrected. He could have even lied and said, oh, I was talking about somebody else. But there's like 7 to 12 people standing around. They're pretending not to notice our little polite debate. But red-faced, I can see Jeff is making the decision to dig his heels in and just keep talking. He's so sure of himself that he's taking a principled stance because he knows he's right. And he just keeps letting the story get bigger and the lies get bigger and out of control until people around us are now Googling the truth for themselves. And Jeff is looking stupid. So listen, we will remove the self-righteous and the principles of personalized doctrine. Now we get to the oldest trick in the book, which is just plain running off at the mouth. For this example, I'm going to tell you about a king named Herod. Maybe you heard of him. He decided he'd get drunk one day at a banquet and make some promises to a dancer. Yeah, because that's never happened. So he's a big baller. He promises this girl anything she wants. He's thinking this will be his chance to show off his wealth by giving her some lavish gift. But she asks him to kill a man that he has great respect for, John the Baptist. Now, right then and there, he could have said, you're out of your mind, but his ego gets the better of him. He made this open-ended promise, wrote this blank check, if you will, in front of everyone, and now peer pressure has set in. Now, let me pause for a second. Man, isn't it funny how a man in authority, this is a king we're talking about, right? Like everybody in the room has to bow down to him, but this man in authority, here he is, letting the pressure of what people might think rob him of his right to exercise that authority. So to keep up appearances, he orders John the Baptist killed, even though it pains him to do so. Man, this lesson is really all about a terrible disease that is plaguing some of our men, young and old. And this epidemic, it stands to deprive us of all our manhood. And it's none other than foot and mouth disease. Guys, sometimes we're terrible at making a course correction once we've spoken. And I hope that we can give you a cure today, but you'll have to decide to take it. It gets back to analyzing our motives to begin with. When you're trying to be right for your own selfish desires, the whole thing fizzles. We must be careful where we plant our feet. If you're right, don't be dead right. Consider the objective and the greater good before you plant your flag. If you're about to deliver your impromptu dissertation on someone else's character, don't base it on a principle that you're not even sure of. And if your mouth gets ahead of your brain, be humble enough to make that course correction. Now, after you've considered all of that, if you're going to take a stand, make sure it's for something important. Because that picket sign that you pick up today could very well define you for the next year or two. Fellas, thanks for listening this morning. I really hope to see you all back here next week. Y'all take care and God bless you.